Welcome, my friends, for the start of the Second Peloponnesian War between Sparta and Athens. We've already covered close to 3,000 years of history, do you realize? I'm the Archivist, let's go! 440 BC, Ionia in western Anatolia. A dispute starts between Samos and Miletus for control of Priene. The Milesians will receive support from Athens, the great sea power of ancient Greece, and Samos will leave the Delian League, the alliance in which Athens has the strongest of upper hands. And logically then, the following year, Samos is tamed by Athens, who has sent none other than Pericles with 40 warships. The island back into Athens' fold, outs its occupiers almost immediately, receiving aid from the Persian satrap of Sardis Pisutnes under the form of a few hundred men. Support also comes from Byzantium. Miletus fears an upcoming attack from the bolstered Samosians, and Athens sends an additional 60 triremes, and battle is fought near the island of Tragia, or Agathonice, south of Samos. Samos's slightly more numerous ships, but a good third of them devoted to carrying troops to indeed attack Miletus, are defeated by the Athenians and their allies. 60 more ships, including 20 from Chios and Lesbos, this island, arrive with additional troops to attack Samos, which falls despite its triple rampart, after 9 months of siege. Well, they really are tough, these Samosians, aren't they? They actually again required additional reinforcements and have tried several land and naval sorties as Phoenician ships tried to bring supplies to them. Samos's walls are destroyed, its war galleys seized, and Byzantium prudently falls back into line too. And about this bust of Pericles, who played a major role in this tough affair, note the way he carries his Corinthian helmet. Hoplites would often put it that way when needing air, resting, or to communicate more easily, as it largely impeded hearing and vision. The year after, way north of this, in the Cimmerian Bosporus, and at the top eastern part of nowadays Crimea, the Thracian Spartacus settles in the city of Ponticapaion, after expelling the Archienactid dynasty, which reigned on the Greek cities of the region from it. These had unified recently under the Archienactid to better resist the Scythians harassing them from the north. In 437 BC, in Italy, the truce between Rome and the Etruscans from the north of the boot is broken. They, helped by the Falisci from Falerii, dispute with Rome over Fidenae. Rome targets Fidenae because 2 of its ambassadors have been assassinated there after a possible scheme by Lars Tolumnius, the king of Veii. This affair between Etruscans and Ladins will drag on. 2 years later, in 435, a naval battle occurs during the summer between galleys of Corcyra, Corfu today, and Corinth for control of Epidamnus on the coast of nowadays Albania. Epidamnus is in the midst of a civil war and Corcyra is besieging it. The Corinthian fleet trying to intervene is defeated by the Corcyrians. Funny to note that Epidamnus was founded by Corcyra and that Corcyra was a colony of Corinth. Shortly after, in Macedon, Philip, one of the sons of late Alexander I, tries to retake power from Perdiccas II. He's backed by Athens, and in response, Perdiccas II intrigues to generate turmoil in some Athenian settlements like Potidea in Chalcidice. 433 Naval Battle of Sybota or Subota, southeast of Corcyra, again between the Corcyrians and the Corinthians by summer's end. Again, and thanks to support from Athenian ships, Corcyra prevails, comes even fall, despite a rough start where both left wings advanced. Over 200 galleys have been involved, and the Corinthians also claim a victory, so it was not that decisive. As Athenian warrior and historian of the time, Thucydides has described this engagement. Let's hear him on it. As the signals were lifted, the action began and the battle was fought. On both sides, there were numerous hoplites on the decks, many soldiers armed with bows and javelins. It was an old-fashioned way that was used. Experience was still lacking, and so it was a violent fight, where proficiency was of little importance, and it rather looked like a land battle. In case of boarding, it was difficult to disengage, for ships were pressed together, and one was resting on the hoplites on the deck, fighting toe-to-toe to prevail when ships were halted. No breakthrough was attempted, and people were fighting with more heart and energy than science. Thucydides in the Peloponnesian War. And before moving on to 432, let's talk about the Cimmerian Bosporus, where Spartacus I just died. His two sons start co-reigning until 390 approximately, Seleucus dying shortly before Sedirus. They first ruled from Panticapaeum, conquering Nymphaeon, then besieging but failing to take Theodosia. Both cities located southwest of their capital on the coast of the Black Sea. They also start a conflict against the Sindi of King Hecataios established on the other side of the Strait of Kerch eastward and prevail, increasing their dominion still. However, a war ensues with the Exomanti, another people of this region, incitated by royal survivors of the Sindi, maybe Princess Tirgatao of the Meodi tribe, and Seleucus and Sedirus suffer setbacks, peace being agreed upon afterwards. In 432, it is time for Athens to counter Perdiccas II of Macedon's schemes against its interests, revolts already starting here and there. It sends 30 ships and 1,000 hoplites towards Macedon, where they start besieging Pydna, right here. 40 triremes and 2,000 men reinforce them quickly enough, but this endeavor has to be postponed, for a pressing matter is ongoing at Potidea in Chalcidice. Potidea has revolted during the spring and is helped by 200 Corinthian warriors. Athens troops are transferred over there, as Perdiccas II accepts to put an end to his plotting. And so Athens' forces regroup at Potidea with some ally contingents and even some kind of rogue Macedonians. There, it is now 2,000 Corinthians under Aristeus that have come to protect Potidea from Athens' reprisals. Potidea is an Athenian colony, but was founded by Corinth, by the way. Battle is fought, and the Athenians win. They can besiege Potidea now. Enterprise which will take 2 years to come to fruition, a siege wall being built around the coastal city. And Sparta being an ally of Corinth, Sparta will soon declare war on Athens. Oh, and did I mention that during the Battle of Potidea, one Socrates saved one Alcibiades, nephew of Pericles? Alright, moving on to 431. First, we'll report a victory of the Roman Aulus Postumius against the Equi and Volsci established southeast of Rome. The next year, the fightings continue, but Rome has the support from the other Latin peoples. And most importantly this year, the conflict between Megara, right here, ally of Sparta, and Corcyra, ally of Athens, and the failed night attack of the Thebans against Plataea, other ally of Athens, in March, sparked the Second Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta for good. This war is sometimes called of Archidamos, after a Spartan king, or of 10 years for its first phase. Unfortunately for it, Athens, the thalassocracy, power of the seas, will quickly lose its excellent strategos, Pericles, as we will see. And so it is that in May, 30,000 Peloponnesians of King Archidamos II of Sparta march on the Attic and pillage it. Athens can muster 25,000 men at best, half of this from the city itself, including 1,000 cavalrymen. The Lacedaemonians of Archidamos II and their allies, including Corinthians of course, on their way, have also laid siege before Oinoi on the border of Attica and Boeotia, but it resists thanks to its walls. Most of the Boeotians are, however, allied to Sparta in this conflict. In the Attic, Eleusis, north of Athens, is sacked, and the Athenian cavalry is repulsed on several occasions, near Phrygia, for example, where they lose some men, including a few Thessalians supporting them. Knowing they stand little chance in the open, the Athenians decide to stay hidden behind their walls, and, without sufficient logistics, the Peloponnesians withdraw from the Attic by the start of summer, plundering Oropos in Boeotia on the way. But of course, Athens is not entirely on the defensive, for it has a powerful fleet. It has sent 150 triremes, including 50 from Corcyra, with 1,000 hoplites and 400 archers, to attack the rear of the enemy. They briefly besiege Methone on the southwestern coast of Peloponnese, but they must re-embark when 100 Spartans, led by Commander Brasidas, we'll talk about him quite a few times, manage to go through the enemy lines to enter the city and man its walls. What a daring move! The Athenians move on to pillage, among others, Phaea in Elis, defeating 300 aliens coming to meet them, and then taking Solion and Astacos in Acarnania. Finally, they take possession, maybe without a fight, of the island of Cephalonia before sailing back to Athens. And that's not all. Another fleet of about 30 hulls has landed warriors in Locris, east of Acarnania, where they take Thronion and defeat Locrians at Alope. Still during the summer, an alliance is passed between the Athenians and Thracian king Sitalkes. Sitalkes gives riders and peltasts. Another alliance is sealed with Perdiccas II of Macedon to fight against the Chalcidians, enemies of Perdiccas. And as summer comes close to its end, the Athenians expel the inhabitants of the island of Aegina, just in front of Athens, accused of having encouraged war, and replace them with Athenian settlers. Then, the vast fleet sails towards Megara, northwest of Athens, already pressured by land since recently. Megara is beset by over 10,000 Athenian hoplites, including 3,000 medics, strangers living in Athens, and some cavalrymen. But Megara is not taken, its surroundings devastated, though. Moreover, a fort is built by Athens on the island of Salamis to maintain pressure on the Megarians. Like Aegina, Salamis is just next to Athens. As the year ends, winter is starting, Evarchos, tyrant of Astacos of Acarnania, remember Acarnania is here, just ousted by the Athenians, finds his place back with the help of Corinth with 40 ships, 1,500 hoplites and some mercenaries. Before returning home, the Corinthians fail to seize some lands of Acarnania and Crani on the island of Cephalonia. And the illustration here was Pericles making his most famous oration, a funeral oration dedicated to all the Athenians dead during this first year of war's operations. And so begins the year 430 BC. We note the Samnite attack, the Samnites being a ferocious mountain people of central Italy against the Etruscan city of Capua in Campania. It falls under their control. While this time, Colophon, on the coast of Ionia, west of Anatolia, between Smyrna and Ephesus, is taken by the Persians. They are led by General Itomanes, and the inhabitants seek refuge in the neighboring port of Notium. The hot days coming back, the Peloponnesians are back in the Attic, as Athens, for its greatest sorrow, is hit by a plague. The disease will kill about a third of its inhabitants, including Pericles, the following year. Some experts today believe that it could have been the typhus easily spreading through the Athenians bunched up within the city walls. Despite the plague and the enemy raiding their lands, the Athenians sent 100 ships, half of them supplied by Chios and Lesbos, with 4,000 hoplites and 300 riders, all galleys being especially prepared for the horses for the first time, towards Peloponnese, under command of Pericles, still up and operational for now. Devastations are made there along the coasts, but Epidaurus in Argolis cannot be taken. In Laconia, the region of Sparta is pillaged, and the fleet is back in Athens just as the Peloponnesians withdraw from the Attic after 40 days of depredations. Before summer ends, in a month-long episode, Athenian strategoi Hagnon and Nicias retake the troops freshly back from Peloponnese and sail for Chalcidice to reinforce the still ongoing siege of Potidea, where 3,000 men were already present. But they have to sail back after losing 1,000 men to the plague. About the same time, Zakynthos, island west of the Peloponnese, is sacked by 100 ships and 1,000 hoplites led by Spartan Cnemos, due to it being favorable to Athens. To close the summer, the inhabitants of Ambracia ravage Amphilochia, way north of all this, but fail to take a city called Argos, their main objective. And so the Ambraciots retreat. This Argos is allied with Athens since a preceding conflict where the Attic city had freed it from an Ambraciot occupation. We can move to 429 BC. As the winter is still ongoing, Potidea, besieged since 432, starved, surrenders to the Athenians and must destroy its ramparts. Elsewhere, on the contrary, the Athenians suffer a little-known minor defeat in Lycia, Anatolian region, where the cities turned against the Persian rule will actually be rivals to one another in the upcoming decades, Xanthos, over here, becoming dominant by the end of the century. And around the same time as the surrender of Potidea, the Athenian ships stationed at Naupactus on the northern coast here of the Gulf of Corinth, commanded by Phormium, land 800 men, Athenian and Messenian hoplites, in Acarnania, doing some sudden attacks, maybe retaking Astacos, before Phormium directly sails back to Athens. Still during the winter, Sitalkes, the Odrysian Thracian king, may be accompanied by Getais, seasoned-mounted archers, among numerous others, marches against Perdiccas II of Macedon. Maybe because he just learned that the Macedonian wanted to betray Athens and send men to help Sparta in some future Acarnanian expedition. The Macedonians sent toward there will arrive too late to participate, by the way. So Sitalkes has a good 10,000 men, a third of this Odrysian and Getai cavalry, and he takes a few Macedonian towns before meeting strong resistance at Europos. There's also some harassment from Macedonian and other allied peoples' cavalrymen, but these finally go to hiding behind cities' walls too when the numbers of the invaders are brought to bear. Sitalkes has a final goal to install one Amintas, or another brother of Perdiccas II, more favorable to Athens, on the Macedonian throne. But the Thracians, doing much pillaging on neighboring regions too, like Chalcidice and Bottiaea, other peoples get worried about this whole affair, and under some pressure, Sitalkes finally agrees on withdrawing in exchange of a promise of marriage between one of his nephews and the sister of Perdiccas II. He goes back home after a full month of campaign in the midst of a particularly hard winter. And this here, as you could read, was a ghetto Dacian helmet of the area of Thrace. Beautiful golden piece. And at last, the winter has gone. The Peloponnesians take the field again, oh dear. Led by Lacedaemonian King Archidamos II, they, for once, don't go for Athens, but for Plataea in Boeotia, that they start besieging with the help of numerous Thebans. The city is encircled with a wooden palisade, threatened at one spot by an earthen mound erected before its walls. In response, the Plataeans heighten their rampart with earth and wood wet against flaming projectiles. In addition to that, they mine under the mound of the assailants and build a second wall behind their first, just in case it's brought low. The Peloponnesians then bring rams, counted by Lewis's, and beams dropped on them to break them, held by chains and so reusable. Then, the attackers pile up wood and debris at the base of the rampart, lighten the pile mixed with pitch and sulfur. But the city is saved by a providential rain. By mid-September, the Peloponnesians and Thebans understand they'll just have to settle for a long siege. Bricks are added to solidify the siege lines, and as some men, mostly Thebans, are left to guard the site, the bulk of the expedition marches back home. At this moment, it appears that only 400 Plataeans and 100 Athenians are holding the city, as the rest has been sent to find refuge in Athens before the encirclement of the place. While this time, victory of the minor cities of Spartolos and Olynthus, this one capital of the Chalcidian League founded in 432 against the Athenian hoplites, come to pillage Chalcidice and Spartolos in particular. Before Spartolos, light infantry of this city and cavalrymen of Olynthus rout their Athenian counterparts, while their hoplites are dominated in the main melee. But then the Athenian hoplites are beset, harassed by their enemies, losing over 400 of their numbers, leaders included. 1,600 foot soldiers and 200 mounted warriors managed to retreat towards Potidea first, and then Athens. Little time after the events of Spartolos, Sparta and its allies send ships with 1,000 hoplites on board, commanded by Spartan Cnemos, against Acarnania, northwest of Peloponnese. And Brachiots and Chaonians, a people from Epirus, north of Acarnania, have called for help as most of Acarnania is favorable to Athens. Arrived there, the Lacedaemonians and their allies march against the city of Stratos, where the Chaoni, little disciplined, fall into an Acarnanian ambush and are routed. Until then, marching in 3 different corps, the Peloponnesians decide to regroup and do well, as they too start suffering from harassing skirmishers, relentless. The expedition wisely decides to march back. And in the same time as these events, a naval encounter occurs at Patrae or Patras in the waters between Peloponnese and central Greece. An Athenian 20 galley-strong squadron, led by Phormion and stationed at Naupactus in Locris, north of Patrae, and opposing ships, mostly Corinthians, about 50 wanting to go support the Acarnanian expedition, clash. Initially, coming from the east, the Peloponnesian side tries to steal past the fleet of Naupactus, but Phormio learns of this move and quickly sails west to intercept that numerically superior force. Corinthians, Lacedaemonians of Sparta, and their allies, surprised, form a defensive circle, prows outward, the 5 faster galleys in the center, with a few other light ships ready to spring out in case of enemy mistake during the battle. Alas for the Peloponnesians, cunning and experienced Phormio simply waits for the wind and tide to disrupt their setup, pushing the hulls against one another to attack to great effect. Several ships are sunk, a dozen captured, and the rest flees towards Sphacteria and Dyme, southwestward. Victorious, Phormio goes back to Naupactus. Slightly later, toward the end of summer, Peloponnesian reinforcements arrive under the form of 50 more ships, and they are eager for revenge. They again confront brave Phormio before Naupactus. First, a massive and feigned attack towards the city breaks the smaller Athenian fleet in two, and most of one-half's galleys fled towards the coast are seized. But the other half, initially in a bad posture, manages to execute some very deft rammings against the pursuing and imprudently dispersed Peloponnesian ships. The allies become the hunted. Several of their units are captured, the seized ships retaken. The vanquished pitifully retreat, mostly towards Corinth, right here, southeast of Naupactus. A score of Athenian triremes arrive late for the battle, having lost time submitting a minor city in Crete. What a detour! And to close this year, as winter starts, the Peloponnesians sheltered in Corinth launch a really unexpected move. With their rowers and material, they go through the Isthmus of Corinth, through land to Nicaea, arsenal of Megara, where 40 ships are given to them, and with which they go on to ravage the island of Salamis, just off Athens' harbor of Piraeus, in a night raid. They take 3 Athenian galleys and withdraw before dawn and the arrival of Athenian reinforcements, puzzled at how the Peloponnesians have been able to attack so close to Athens. GG's, as one would say. And we'll finish on 428 BC. Of course, in May, the good season returning, the Peloponnesians launch a land expedition, this time coming back into Attica. After a few weeks and some skirmishes against the Athenian cavalry, the men, led by Spartan king Archidamus II one more time, march back to Peloponnese. And on the great island of Lesbos, northwest of Ionia, the cities, members of Athens' Delian League, revolt against the Athenian authority. The city of Lesbos itself, in the western part of the island, allies with Mytilene in the east, and Athens sends 40 triremes against the latter, trying to take advantage of ongoing celebrations. But, informed just in time, the Mytileneans launch several ships against this fleet. They are defeated and quickly in flight, though, and the Athenians initiate land and naval blockade of Mytilene. A land sortie of the besieged meets some success, but is not fully exploited. 2 siege camps are installed here, and Lesbos is also under blockade. While this time, 30 Athenian war galleys attack the coasts of Laconia, the region of Sparta. Asclepios, the strategos at the head of this fleet, continues, helped by Acarnanians, against Oinade in Acarnania, before advancing inland by way of a river. To his doom, he's killed and his men retreat. Halfway through August now, a Lesbian embassy having called the Peloponnesians for aid, these mass detachments at the gates of the Attic to launch a second expedition against Athens this year. Ships of Corinth are transferred through the isthmus for the occasion, but 100 Athenian galleys come and make such a show of force along the coasts that the expedition is cancelled. And as 40 more Athenian or allied triremes join the siege of Lesbos, the Mytileneans try an attack against Methymna, local city allied with Athens, to no success. Methymna attempts in response an assault against Antissa, other local town, but is beaten near it by its warriors. Then 1,000 more Athenian hoplites arrive on Lesbos, which even tightens the siege of Mytilene just before winter starts. And finally, whoops, I'm late. During this winter, Athenians are killed by Carians, right here, and inhabitants of Aine in Ionia, as their company Strategos Lysicles, he himself killed too, as he was gathering the toll due to Athens by its subjects to support the war effort. It seems that both sides could maintain their war effort for some time at this pace, right? But of course some events, like the humiliation of Sphacteria, will soon shake everybody's convictions. We'll see this and the ends of the sieges of Plataea by the Peloponnesians and of Lesbos by the Athenians next week. Thanks for your fidelity and support to this channel. See you all soon.